Welcome back, everyone. I'm Rebecca Honsinger, the Continuing Education and Emerging Technologies Librarian for the Central New York Library Resources Council. My pronouns are she, her. Thank you for joining us for this year's annual conference and for this session, Challenging Patron Situations. Before we get started, I'd like to take care of some housekeeping. We will be utilizing the chat as well as the Q&A feature for this webinar. Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat now. Please use the Q&A feature to ask questions so they don't get lost in the chat. You can find that towards the bottom center of your screen. Live captioning is available for this session. To toggle the subtitles on or off, click the live transcript button at the bottom of your screen and choose either show subtitle or hide subtitle. All attendees are expected to follow CLRC's Code of Conduct, which will be added to the chat shortly. To summarize, please treat all CLRC staff, event attendees, and speakers with respect. Those who are not adhering to the Code of Conduct will be removed from the conference. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our presenter, the Assistant Library Director of the White Plains Public Library, Kathleen Degyansky.
Good afternoon, everyone. First, I'd like to thank the Central New York Library Resources Council for having me today. And thank you all for joining me. I'm extremely camera shy. So what I'm gonna do, I just signed on so you could see I'm a real person. And but I'm pretty much gonna stick to my screen share. So I'm gonna start working on that. Can you all see the presentation? I hope so.
Not yet, Kathy.
Not yet. Okay. Let me go back to the Zoom thing. Huh. I'm having trouble.
Okay.
You guys have my slides? You can put them up?
Yes, give me
Okay.
one moment to do that.
I'm sorry. I don't know why I can't.
Oh, wait,
You see it?
there we go. Now
Okay,
we can see it.
Okay. So the reason for this presentation was an
Kathy, I'm
internal
sorry, I'm
one.
going to interrupt you one more time. If you want to just go ahead and hit present slideshow, because right now we see your tools on the outside of it too. If you go to, towards where you are, the bottom right.
Yeah.
Or you know what, if you go to slideshow on your menu on the top, that's probably the easier way for me to describe it to you. And then just go ahead and click from the beginning. Perfect. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Okay. So I'm going to stop my video because you can see that I'm a real person. So the reason that I did this presentation, or I created this presentation, was an internal one at our library. And we're a medium-sized city of 55,000 here in White Plains, and we're in the county seat. White Plains is in the county seat. And so there's a lot of courts nearby us, right around in close proximity. And there's a lot of social services here. So we get a lot of people here from all over the county. Even though our population is 55,000, it swells to about 250,000 every day as people come here for work, for court dates, for shopping, for dining, so it's like a central area in the Westchester County region. So we have our share of situations here. And the director here, Brian Kenny, asked me to prepare something for staff to help them manage things that were happening, pretty regularly here. And so when I was preparing this presentation, I didn't know what to call it, because I think we've all been to various programs that, are called difficult patrons or bad patron, whatever they're called. I didn't want to have a sort of a negative connotation on the patrons. So my husband, he's so helpful. I was talking to him about it, like, what should I call it? It needs a name. And he said, why don't you call it Misfits and Deplorables? Well, of course I couldn't call it that. So I settled on this title. And the reason it has the March date is because that's when I was presenting it to staff, and all staff were required to attend this training. So working with the public and a public library is our job one. We welcome everybody here. That includes patrons with issues like homelessness, addiction, the garden variety complaints that, just why don't you have a hummingbird garden out there anymore? Or, why is my book still at the other library when I asked to be sent 5 days ago? So there's that's everybody has issues. So even I would say, our normal patrons, our regular patrons, I don't want to use that word either. They have issues too. And we often don't know why people come in with issues. We don't know if they just had a fight with their girlfriend, if they just got a parking ticket, if they just got some kind of court notice. But we do have support here, and you probably do too. But one thing I want to really point out is this librarian in charge. We initiated this so that there's always, no matter how long we're open or what time we're open to, there's always somebody designated as being in charge. We also have a security guard. We have one security guard, but then we're also, as you all do, have to call the police from time to time, and that's our support. We're very lucky. Our police department is next door. So when we call them, they come pretty quickly. So we noticed when we did call the police that, and observe them, they were really very good at solving our problems, without having it escalate. And I've observed them many times, and they're very skilled at doing that. So when I was asked to do this presentation, I called public safety and I said, who does the training on that? Because it's really, really excellent. And they said, well, a lot of the training that we receive probably wouldn't suit your purposes. But one thing they did recommend is that we look into and use verbal de-escalation techniques. And so what is that? It's tactics that are non-physical to prevent potentially dangerous situations. And in fact, to prevent physical confrontations. And like I said, our local police is very, very good at that. So I wanted to study it and learn more about it. So some of the tactics are just simply listening, refocusing the person on something positive, using humor, but that can be tricky because humor, what I think is funny might not be what the person I'm talking to thinks is funny. Or, I sort of have a little sarcastic side to me, and I have to be very careful not to really use that too much. So very sparingly. Also giving choices like, well, you can either stop eating your potato chips or you can take them outside and eat them. And setting limits. We do, allow people to have drinks in here, but we request that they have a lid on them, for example. So that's sort of a tiny limit. And then try to empathize with the person. And I'll talk about this more later. So listening is the most important thing. I know you want to say something and you're off, sometimes when somebody's yelling at you, you want to interject, but I think it's really important. And the police underscored this to me, that you give your physical and mental attention to the other person and make sure you're engaged by using eye contact, using unobtrusive gestures like nodding, saying okay, or asking a question. Reflecting, paraphrasing and reflecting, using the feelings of the other person. I understand that you're angry that your book's not here yet. Let's see what we can do about it. And listen when you're listening. So often, if somebody is coming to the reference desk or to the circulation desk to get help, and you're doing something else, you're looking at your computer, you're writing something down, that can make it escalate. So it's, they don't pay attention to me. They're not listening to me. I'm trying to talk to her. If she's on the phone or she's, talking to another person at the desk. So to listen when you're really listening. Don't try to multitask when you're doing that. Here's some don'ts. using challenging postures like face-to-face finger pointing, avoid raising your voice or making threats, and giving ultimatums or demands, hard stare, or other aggressive body language like putting your hands on your hips, pointing, like shaking your finger. It's really hard to not become emotionally involved when somebody's calling you a stupid biatch. However, that's really important. You take a deep breath and don't get emotionally involved. You have to realize that it's so hard not to take it personally, but that doesn't help the situation. It doesn't help resolve it. So it can make it blow up even more. It's really hard to do that, because I don't know about you, but when we're in these situations with patrons that are having difficulty following the rules or whatever it is, I mean, I want to win. I want to have the outcome in my favor. So like if I want somebody to leave the library who's doing something wrong, or, being, disrespectful or whatever, I want them to leave. I want my outcome to prevail. But still, it's very hard not to be emotional. But still, if you try to relax, you try to take a deep breath during a confrontation like this, it's helpful. So again, remaining calm and listen. I can't stress this enough. I guess I am stressing this too much, but I don't think I can. Really listen to the person. Really try to see what the problem is. Sometimes they go all off the bend, but to try to rein them back into what the real problem is. And then you can always ask for help. So there's less of a chance of aggressive behavior if two people are talking to the person. And it's good to have a witness later, but it's also not good to have onlookers who can become additional participants. For example, like we have somebody in the lobby. We had somebody in the lobby several years ago who had a heart attack right at the circ desk. And of course they passed out. But it drew a crowd, and I can understand that people are rubbernecking on the highway when there's an accident or something like that. But it's really good if you are having this kind of confrontation to prevent the onlookers, to try to keep people, okay, we got this, we're handling it, or take person out to one side if that's possible, or to an office that's optimal, or somehow try to eliminate the crowd factor if you can. But if you have a staff person that's sitting there with you at a desk, that's kind of beneficial for the other person to be there to sort of work things out. Now, in my library, I'm the assistant library director, and I have an office, and I sit in an office on the main floor. So by the time I can attend to some kind of disturbance out on the floor, it's gotten already escalated, because if it doesn't start with me, just walking around the library. I hear somebody yelling, I hear somebody cursing, I hear, but by the time I get involved, which I always get involved, it's already at that yelling stage, so to speak. But when I come out to help the staff person that's trying to deal with this situation, like I said, it's already pretty hot. But I think it's really good if you have another person sitting there with you or standing there with you. So I'm going to talk a little bit about homeless people. We have a lot of homeless patrons in our library because, like I said, the courts are here. The social services are here. There's a shelter probably within 2 blocks of our library. And so we do get a fair number of people that come in the library and hang out most of the day, especially if it's really cold or it's really hot. Because of course, it's more comfortable in here than wandering around the town. And we have resources. We have computers. We don't require people to have cards to use our computers. We provide guest passes. So, you know, it's really a place for them. And we welcome them, actually, and we get to be friendly with them, especially if you know the homeless people in your neighborhoods. They're probably coming in every day, same people. And we have a similar situation like this. So in regards to the homeless, they, in so many ways, they are just like you. In other words, they had parents. Whether those relationships are still intact, I don't know, but they had parents. They probably had a crush on somebody in high school, so they have felt that. And so they have a lot of experiences that you have had in your life too. But on the other hand, they're not just like you. They, you know, their whole social structure is probably compromised. They probably are homeless because most of the major relationships in their lives are not intact anymore. They've worn out their welcome pretty much everywhere. They have, you know, a situation where they might not know where they're sleeping that night. They might not know where their next meal is coming from. So a librarian yelling at them in the library is probably not their biggest problem. And getting kicked out of the library also is not really their biggest problem. So in that way, they are not like you. So I went through my PowerPoint too fast, so I have to go back. Sorry about that. I don't want to talk about the case studies just yet. I feel like I missed a couple of slides.
Yeah, Kathy, I noticed that when you were clicking through sometimes I saw them double up. And I believe we missed
A lot.
your second slide. Yeah, and I see this one. I don't know that we caught that one too, but feel free to go back and forth with your mouse to find that. Or I'm sorry, it was the third slide. Yes.
Okay, so I want to point this out too. I don't know if you can see it. So what's really important for us is that we have a code of conduct that's printed, and you probably also have that document too, because it's really helpful to have that. So it provides a policy for expected patron behaviors, and all staff in our library are empowered to enforce the code of conduct. It means anybody here, if there's a shelver, we call pages shelvers here. If there's a shelver who witnesses some kind of bad behavior, they don't have to come and get me. They don't have to come and get the security guard. They don't have to do anything. They can just correct that person. But so many people don't feel comfortable with that. And so I'm always available. The security guard is always available to enforce the code of conduct. But it's just easier if everybody's on board and everybody's taking ownership of that a little bit. And another thing we've had issues with is that there could be a serious situation. Somebody's crying in the stacks, or somebody's it seems to be ill. We don't want staff to go through the protocol of calling the librarian in charge or calling we want them to feel empowered to call for an ambulance or call the police. If they see something happening like in the immediate time, they can feel free to call the police at any time. We don't expect them to go through a chain of command to do that for the especially, I mean, we expect them to use their common sense. I had a situation where I saw two patrons sitting on the floor in the back of the library, of course, to avoid detection. And they were, one person was giving a tattoo to the other person. So I didn't go get the security guard. I didn't call the police. I said, you have to stop that immediately. I mean, that's ridiculous. And of course they gave me some lip, but they did leave the library, but I didn't wait to go and get help. I just dealt with it myself. So I'm going to go through this. So calling the police, we're lucky. I don't know how your situations are, but we're lucky in the fact that the police station, as I mentioned earlier, is right across from the, it's right next door to the library. So we just, our response time is very good. And they also provide, you know, other options for what can be done. They can, obviously they can arrest the person. That's not very common, but they can do that. But as soon as the police come in the building, I really try not to call the police if I can resolve the situation on my own. It may be easy to say, okay, they're just next door, they'll just pop over here. But I think once a police officer enters the building, that ups the temperature of the incident for everybody, not just the person that we're trying to calm down or talk to, but also the rest of the people using the library and all the staff. You know, it just like makes the incident, like, it makes it more difficult, in my opinion. So even though, you know, often you have to do that, you don't have any choice. If somebody's being threatening or somebody's like really out of control, you have to do that. But if you can avoid it, that would be helpful. So some of the communication barriers I've seen is right away, like you're gonna know, if it's somebody you know and it's somebody you have issues with every day, you're gonna already prejudge a situation. You're gonna say, oh, I know that guy. He comes in here every day. He's always a pain. He never really follows the rules. And you're already gonna have an idea what to do before you even go over to the situation. Of course, not listening and criticizing the person, that's not really helpful. And again, engaging in the power struggle. And that's me. I struggle with that a lot because, you know, like I said earlier, like I want to win. I want the outcome to be in my favor. Also, ordering people like, get out of here right now. That's not really a good way to handle it. Minimizing the situation, like something that might be like nothing to you, is really important to that person, especially if it's like one of the garden variety incidents I was talking about earlier, meaning, you know, meaning my book has been in the other library for 5 days. Why isn't here? You know, it's hard not to say, well, it's just a book, like relax, you know, it'll come when it comes. It's just some mystery that you want, but that's minimizing the person. They're upset already. And they want you to help them. They don't want you to say, well, that's, you know, minimize their problem. And then of course, trying to argue with somebody who's ill, mentally ill, or somebody who has, you know, a real issue with another person. They're arguing among each other. You don't want to start arguing too. So like sometimes there's two people arguing, and that's why you would intervene, two patrons arguing. And I have a case study on that. We'll talk about that later. So to be an empathic listener, you don't want to be judgmental. Again, you want to put that, you know, your feelings. You may have just got a parking ticket, or you may just had an argument with your child on the phone, but you can't be judgmental in these situations. You can't ignore the person or just pretend to listen. So tactics are restating, I understand that you're very upset about your book not being here. I understand why you don't want this other person to sit next to you. I understand that, but that doesn't mean you agree with it. You're just kind of validating them. And if you try to establish a rapport with the other person, like when I come up to a person, even if they're like screaming and yelling, I say, hi, I'm Kathy. You know, what seems to be the problem here? And, you know, just to be like kind of friendly, even in the rash of all the chaos that might be going on. it's important to try to get a rapport with the other person. Now, if it's somebody like I told you before, and you probably have this too, it's somebody you have trouble with every day. Like every day you come in, they come in and you go, oh brother, you know, Joe's here again. Like he's gonna do this and that and the other, but maybe he won't. So if you try to talk to them when they're not acting up, like when there isn't an issue, you know, if you get to know them, you know them, they should know you. And if they see you or regard you as somebody who's not going to judge them, who's going to pay attention to their problem, it really de-escalates the situation incredibly well. So it's, if you have these people that come in every day and you're like, oh brother, and nobody, and you already get your back up, you know, it might be helpful and very constructive to get to know them, get to know their name, get to know, you know, how they're doing. Or, you know, we had this one couple, and they still come in pretty much every day, and they would always fall asleep. They couldn't stay awake. And when I have that situation in the library, I will always go up to the person and say, are you ill? Are you not well? And usually they're just sleeping, or that's when they'll say, no, I'm fine, I'm fine. I say, well, if you can't stay awake in the library, there's something wrong. And, you know, I would really want to call an ambulance or call somebody, a doctor, to come and help you, because that's not normal to not be able to stay awake, you know. And so I was dealing with this couple, a man and a woman, and they were just sleeping all the time, and we were always correcting them on it. And finally, I said, you know, is there something wrong? Like, do you just walk around all night? So they say, no, we're heroin addicts. So that took me aback. And they said, and so when we go outside and we can't stay awake. And once I knew that they were addicts, I was able to help them. I was able to suggest resources for them in the county and so forth. And now, I mean, they don't sleep anymore, but they still do come in. And now, you know, we're friendly. I wouldn't say we're friends, but we're friendly, and it's not an antagonistic relationship. So if you can establish a rapport with somebody, that's a big challenge. And a lot of people don't feel comfortable with that. But if you're in the public and you're dealing with the public, I suggest that you hone those skills a little better. So 80 to 90% of our communication is nonverbal. Okay, you may be trying to de-escalate the situation, but you got to recognize and understand that these nonverbal cues we're sending with our body language. You know, a natural smile is good. A fake smile can aggravate the situation. Try to be slow and not shake your hands, not point your finger, wag your finger. But yet you want to maintain 1.5 to 3 feet. I'm going to go with 3 feet on this, a personal space. I notice that the police officers, when they come in, they always stay at least that far away, because if somebody is going to punch you, or if somebody's going to kick you, if you have that space, they wouldn't be able to make contact. Let's hope it never gets to that point, but it's a good rule of thumb to just stay a bit of a distance from the person. And of course, I'm using my outside voice, but you'd want to use a lower tone of voice when you're in these situations. And it never hang up your respect for the other person. Saying please, thank you, these things indicate respect. Don't, like, sometimes people get in your face, you know, and I've had that experience, and you probably have too if you've been around library land any length of time. But using, you know, going in somebody's face, or finger pointing, raising your voice, threatening, or giving ultimatums, these are all something that you shouldn't shy to control. So I'm going to, I think, talk about, I still did it again, darn it.
Kathy, if I can recommend just using maybe your keyboard to use the arrow keys rather than the mouse, sometimes that helps.
Oh, all right. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's fine.
I've done this a million times, you know that? So I'm gonna go to the case studies pretty soon. I'm sorry, bear with me. So once these incidents start, sorry, I got a window in front of me that's when you get in these situations, we always report even these minor situations to the librarian in charge in security. So even if you see somebody eating a sandwich or whatever, and you don't allow that, you should even report that. And little situations like the people falling asleep can be a cry for help or warning signs of a bigger disturbance to come. So I'm going to say complete an incident report. This is an internal report. It's not something that we share with patrons. It's not on our website, but we have an internal report. And whenever we call the police or fire department, we always complete an incident report. And basically, our incident report just lists the date and the time, the person completing it. And then there's also a description of the incident and the witnesses, if there are any, and then the action taken, which is to call the police. If you wrote yes, we asked them to put the officer's name in and their shield number, and the fire department. And then if we call the fire department, then we want to have a record of the person in charge that showed up. We had a young person in our children's area that set a hand sanitizing gel on fire. So we obviously had, it was a small fire. I think it was pretty ingenious that the person did that, but it was still an incident and scary one at that. So whenever we have an incident in our library, we complete an incident report, and it gets routed to the administration. I get a copy as the assistant library director. We send one to the police department. We give one to our security offices and also our security officer, and also the department heads. So in our library, that is the adult services department, the youth services department, and the circulation department, so that we all know within a couple of days what happened. So I'm going to talk a little bit in the remaining few minutes we have about some incidents, but I have these various incidents from the few days that I thought were the most interesting to talk to in our staff. But just today we had an incident that I want to tell you about, which is it was right before we were opening, and the security guard told me about an incident that he had the day before with one of the patrons. And she said, and he's standing outside right now. She said, but yesterday he came in and he's obviously ill because he came in and he was okay. But then we observed that he was bleeding. And we said to him, you know, you're bleeding. And he goes, well, somebody just punched me. But that turned out to not be true. It turned out that he was using the restroom a lot, and that he had an issue that was requiring him to use the restroom. The blood was from a result of that. So the security guard wanted him to not be allowed in that today. So because, you know, she was worried that he would have an illness that might be contagious, that it might be a danger to the staff or other patrons. And so she went out and talked to him, and he said that yes, he had been ill, but that he had gotten medical attention and he was okay. So we let him come in. But that, you know, she was going to bar him from the library, and I really didn't think that was correct. And after she just had a conversation with him, we were able to let him in. So I thought that that was a good resolution, and he's okay. And now we know his name is Alex, and we can greet him. Hi, Alex, how are you feeling? Everything okay? And so she not only established a rapport with him, but also resolved the problem just by simply talking to him and listening to him. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the February 10th incident. We have a little cafe outside, just adjacent to the library. You can enter the library through the cafe. And we had Cedric, who's a regular library patron, and another man were arguing loudly in the cafe. And the man seated at a table supposedly had asked Cedric to put on his mask. And they were both swearing, and it looked like they would soon fight. The person in charge called the police, and by the time the police arrived, and remember, they're right next door, Cedric had left, and the seated patron was arguing with me, Kathy Degyansky, and that patron also eventually left. So, I mean, I think that we could have resolved that problem without this, the reference librarian immediately calling the police. She didn't go to talk to them. She didn't come to get me. She just called the police. So I thought that was a little bit rash, and I'm not sure it was extremely helpful. Okay, the next one, December 27th. This is a little long, so bear with me. It's probably the only last one I can talk to you about with the time remaining. So around 5, I'm reading directly from these descriptions. These are staff people that completed this. And this one was completed by a reference librarian. It happened like right around the evening time. So around 5:20, a thin black male patron, approximately 40s, in white t-shirt, sneakers, and maroon beanie, started shouting and had his mask off while seated in the computer area. I went to the security guard and asked him to make a round to check on things. While doing that, the other librarian at the desk asked the patron to pull his mask up, and he did not do so. This is when we had mask requirements. We don't anymore. Again, the guard told the patron to put his mask up, and he ignored her and told her to mind her business and get out of here, and then proceeded to call her the N-word, as she told him if he did not listen, he would have to leave. She then told him if he did not leave, we would call the cops. He continued to argue with the guard, who began telling him to get the F out of here. The guard said that, but mind you. And at that point, the other librarians went over to try to assist her, but they called the police as the arguing continued. And as the librarian calling the police on the phone, the patron began to walk out, and the guard followed him. And the guard continued to curse at the patron, and the patron went out, and she told him to leave the premises. And at this point, the other librarians tried to get the guard inside, and they eventually got the librarian in charge designated involved, and the guard came inside, and the police arrived after it was all over and the patron had left the premises. So at that point, the next day we fired that guard, because obviously it didn't do anything to solve the problem. It didn't do anything to de-escalate the problem. Her actions actually escalated the problem, especially when she started cursing back at him. So that's word to the wise. That's just an example of how the incident was handled, I would say, incorrectly. So I have 2 minutes left. So I thought I'd talk about the guide, the resources for this presentation. I hope you all have a copy of Ryan Dowd's The Librarian's Guide to Homelessness. It's really worth a read. I read that book in preparation for this presentation, and I got so many useful and helpful tips out of it. And I would really highly encourage you to obtain a copy and read it, especially if this is something you don't feel comfortable doing, because librarians don't go into public librarianship because they're expecting this kind of stuff to happen. They're expecting, nice ladies to come in and ask about new mysteries. But our job is not like that. So I think, especially if you have homelessness problem in your city, in your town, even in small areas now, I think this is a really strong read. Also, once I was talking to, I'm going to skip down to my third source, Capital Daniel McMahon, because as I said, I went to them first and I said, you guys are amazing at doing this. I want to learn how you do it. And he was very helpful. And he's the one that referred me to the risk management services, the Northeast Washington Educational Service District 101, which is where I learned a lot about de-escalating techniques. So these are all sources that you can take advantage of, and I hope you do. So I think I'm going to start my video again, in case there's any question. I'm really sorry about my awkward PowerPoint.
Not a problem, Kathy. We saw all the slides. We ended up seeing everything, and we
just didn't see them in order. I don't think it mattered.
So we do have a question, which I think is a really good one, because I know I faced this when I was working in public libraries. Dave asks, it annoyed me and stressed me because I had a patron complaining about a homeless person in the library and said tax dollars shouldn't go to that. What in your mind is the nicest answer? And he said, I know that's very specific, but it has come up often. And I know I've had that
okay
as well.
I'm happy to field that question. So when a patron complains to me about the homeless people and they shouldn't be in here and so forth, what I say is that, this has been adjudicated in the courts. And at times when people have thrown homeless people out or barred homeless people from their libraries, there have been court cases that states that they would lose. If we decided to start kicking out all the homeless people and we prevented them from using the library and somebody filed a suit against us, we would lose. So I think that that's a good answer. That's the answer I use. I say, well, this has been, handled by the courts, and the courts say that they have as much right to use the public library as anyone else. So that's how we handle our situation like that. I hope that helps, Dave.
He did say thank you, adjudicated in courts, thanks, with a smiley face. So I do think that's a really great answer, because I have to say, like, when somebody comes to me, or when someone would come to me with something like that, I feel like the nice answer of, like, the libraries for everyone is a lot of the time not the answer that particular person wants to hear, unfortunately.
No, because they're already stating the opposite.
Right.
Yeah.
So I do appreciate that.
I also want to talk about, the homelessness, and sometimes they're odoriferous, right? So I've had instances like that, where people have complained about that, like that patron smells, And when I get that complaint, and I have had that complaint, I bring the person to my office, and I say, look, I'm not kicking you out. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I had this complaint about you, and I said, I actually have in my desk, like bath wipes. I don't know if you know what those are. Hopefully you've never been in a hospital and had to have those, but they have wipes that are big, that you can clean your body with. And I usually give them a pack of those. I do that on my own. The library doesn't buy those, but I do that on my own.
Thanks, Kathy.
Anyway.
Yeah. So any other questions, please add them to the Q&A. I'll ask my own. Well, I have kind of a comment and then a question kind of following it. The one thing that stood out to me at the very beginning of your presentation was you're pointing out that garden variety issues are often a factor, not just people experiencing homelessness, not just people coming in who are suffering from some sort of mental illness. And it could just be something as simple, like you said, as having a bad day prior to coming into the library. And I guess my question for you would be, for library staff, what is your best strategy for us if we're coming in with a bad day and then we have someone coming to us with a bad day? What is your best strategy for us to kind of overcome that?
I think, just breathing is really helpful, take a deep breath. But if you're really having a bad day and you cannot deal, I think it's just say, like I had a patron one time spit at me. He spit on me. And I just, obviously that was horrible. And I just stood up from the desk and I said, I don't think I can help you anymore. And I walked away and I went in the back and I got somebody else, And it was because I couldn't take a hold on a book that he wanted to place a hold on. and it wasn't a holdable item. And that's how angry he got. It wasn't a crazy person. Well, I don't know. It wasn't, like your garden variety mentally ill person. But it's best to, I would say, to say, excuse me one moment, I'm going to get somebody who can help you, and walk away. And I think if you tell your supervisor, or you tell the librarian in charge, if you have someone designated like that, or even just a colleague, say, look, I really need your help. We are all so helpful. I think we would always help a colleague. If you're the only librarian on the desk, you just have to, I think it's best to get up and say, excuse me one moment, and go in the back and, punch the wall and then come back. Like try not to take it out on the person.
That's great. That's great. Know your limits, sort of.
It's hard though. It's hard. It's hard,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think a lot of the time, anybody in public service, a lot of the time ends up being a punching bag. And a lot of the time, like you said, you're just the messenger. It was not a holdable item. There was nothing you could do about that.
Right. I couldn't do anything about it. But, I wasn't having a bad day that day until that happened.
Sure.
So anyway.
Thank you. I'm going to put the links for a certificate of attendance request form and the evaluation form in the chat again. I don't see any other questions coming through, Kathy, but I'm just going to go ahead and say thank you so much for all the information that you shared with us.
Sure.
I think this was it was just very informative, and I think it's going to help people kind of know how to relate to their patrons. I meant to say this too, the prejudging. I know I did that when I worked in a public library. Everyone has that one patron, like, oh, there they are again.
It comes.
Yeah.
What's going to happen now?
And I thought the advice to establish a rapport, I think that so very simple, but very effective. So I really appreciate that advice.
It's time consuming and it's hard too, because you don't want to be that person's friend, like you wish they wouldn't show up, but still, they're the public, and that's our job.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being with us today. I really appreciate it. And I think our attendees got a lot out of this presentation as well. We are now going to take another break starting at, I guess, at 1:47. So it's going to end up being a 13-minute break. We're using the same Zoom link throughout the day. So you can either stay logged in here or come back. We'll be leaving slides up and playing music. At 2 p.m., you can come back to us for our business meeting and the presentation of the 2022 Library Award. In the meantime, I will send everyone the conference program and also a link to our virtual poster sessions. So if you're interested in looking at our posters during our little break, please do make some comments, ask some questions. Our presenters always love to answer your comments and questions. So we'll see you back here at around 2 o'clock. Thanks, everyone.